All right, thank you very much, everyone, for taking an interest in this important panel discussion on IoT, which will be a dive into some of the latest transformational technologies, among other things. And I'm confident you'll find the discussion enriching and enlightening. So the format of the panel is very simple. I have a series of devilishly hard questions to pose to the panelists, intended to stump them. And of course, through this, we'll explore the latest developments and innovations. That's off script, guys. So it's going to be easier than that. So just so you know. Now, our panel today has been selected carefully so that it represents a whole range of perspectives. And so with this allows you to kind of see where we're all coming from, and also to help us frame the conversation as broadly as possible. Now, before we get going with the actual Q&A side, I'm going to invite the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and describe a little bit about their work in IoT, and that way we'll have a suitable grounding. And so I will begin with Satyam, who is on the video monitor, and that way it's very easy to overlook the TV screen, but with your smiling, beaming face, we've got you on the radar. So over to you first.
I'm Dr. Satyam Priyadarshi. I'm a technology fellow and chief data scientist at Halliburton. I've been about almost 8 years now in the industry. And as I lead the Center of Excellence for Big Data, Data Science, and Digital IoT's impact on what we can do to create value is important. And as a result, we partner with all the solutions that are developed by the Landmark side as well as Halliburton, bigger company, to actually put AI, ML, and other data science solutions on top of the data we collect from various sensor technologies.
Great, thank you so much. And now joining us live and on stage in person, in the flesh, is Henry Guo from Petcham. Henry, over to you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So my name is Henry Guo. I lead product management for our industrial business in Petcham. So Petcham is an enterprise AI company focused on helping customers break down barriers, make sure AI is accessible. For our industrial business, we work predominantly with oil and gas, chemical, metals and mining company, really deploying AI, ML, building our software platform, and making sure we make our customers successful. Previously, before this, I was at VMware and Cisco Security, so I have a computer science background, really focusing on AI, machine learning. Thank you for.
Great, thank you, Henry. And last but not least, certainly not least, is David Crawley. David.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to sharing ideas with you. I'm at the College of Technology at the University of Houston. I'm a professor of practice, and my areas of practice is innovation, emerging markets, corporate intelligence, and workforce modeling.
Thank you, David. So now, just to kind of set a bit of context, our IoT world, as you know, has seen explosive growth over the past several years. And industry observers forecast that compounded annual growth rates of 20% for the foreseeable future is not out of the question. And in fact, the IoT industry is facing quite significant business and structural changes. This technology is viewed now as a national security concern. And if you look at the marketplace of chip fabrication, there's a considerable upheaval going on with consolidation in the chip supplier sector, shortage of chips based on the pandemic, which you can see in the automotive industry. And we believe that oil industry executives are going to be interested in the latest trends because these have a transformational impact on the industry and on our landscape, and particularly in an era that's characterized by risk reduction, emissions management, future-proofing, cost containment, and the like. So our panel today is going to talk through some of these critical issues. And so with that, let me first turn to the panel. And you know, we from our earlier conversations, we heard some of the barriers that are really blocking adoption. And so what I'd like to do is kind of at least understand what's blocking progress here and clear some of that out of the way. So we'll begin, I think, David, with you on this one in your role in the sort of a world of academia. What is it that you're seeing that companies are asking about insights around barriers to adoption? What's blocking adoption here?
I think one of the barriers to adoption of Internet of Things in the oil and gas industry is you. The industry, the people that are working there. There's a reported gap of innovation skills, roughly around 27% in the energy industry right now, 32% if you in Europe. You add to that the population, the workforce is about 26%, give or take, is going to retire in the next 5 years. And then the average degradation of skills in the workforce erodes by half every 6 years. You add all that together with Industry 5.0, just 4 or 5 years away, you have a crisis that nobody's paying attention to.
Yeah, significant.
And so the activities of getting the workforce up to speed and understanding how to work with Internet of Things, how to work with technology, and it's not just the information that helps us make better decisions, but it's OT as well,
That's OT as an operational technology.
operational
Yeah,
technology.
yeah, quite right. Henry, did you want to offer up some observations as a, I'm just going to characterize you as the millennial on the panel. I might be wrong, but.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, I don't want to reveal my age. But no, David, I think that's a very good point. I do want to go into that a little more, but what you said very interestingly about the retirement aspect. In our space, in the AI world, ML world, we actually see a lot of that. And that's actually one of the actually key drivers when people are looking to AI, actually. It's very interesting enough, because what AI really does is augmentation. So a lot of people are retiring, new people are coming on, they might not have the same skill sets, everybody has different types of optimal days. So they use AI as kind of that barrier, that way to stream all these together. So as folks retire, you can use AI to augment people who are starting to get on. So then that's exactly what we're doing with our customers, and that's why they approached us. But in that space, what we're seeing barriers is, clean data. How do you get the data ready to make sure? How do you, there's thousands of, gigabytes, terabytes of data growing every day. I mean, how do you make sense of that? And also, I think one thing we touched upon is the entrenched aspects. There are already technologies, there are other softwares there. Why do I want to learn something new is sometimes what we hear, and prove it to me. So these are, at least from my point of view, from enterprise AI companies, what we see as barriers.
Dr. Satyam, maybe you could comment a little bit on what you're also seeing as these critical barriers. Some things I certainly keep in mind is the rigidity of our infrastructure as a significant block. Are there other things that you're seeing that stand out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And what couple of things that I'll put, I think David mentioned that it's the industry that is the blocker. But I think more than that, it is the whole environment that we are in. One of the things that we do, as you mentioned, legacy systems, right? And in order to figure out a solution that is really cost effective and implementable in a time frame that will actually generate value is still a unknown game, because IoT makers are making devices thinking from a more futuristic point and less from how to actually make the legacy systems really work effectively. And that causes a little bit of a friction in terms of deploying IoT solutions. The other one is the actual understanding of IoT itself, what exactly it can do in what areas, right? We are using terminology IoT very commonly, but is that actually the device really connected to the internet in some shape and form? We can put sensors and not connect them, and still some people are calling it IoT, which makes it very difficult for leadership to really understand as to what is the value being created. And the third one is the return on innovation that will be generated with the deploying of industrial IoT sensors around the whole workflow is actually not easy to comprehend in the short term, but it is something that is a long-term solution. So as an industry, thinking about long-term value proposition is actually very important, rather than saying, oh, I spent X million now, can I get the return in like 1 year or 2 years? And that is the mindset change a little bit required.
And certainly for my own work, the topics that have consistently cropped up, again, back to my analogy earlier, where people become aware, but then that first and foremost are doubters, is how do you move them through the doubt curve as quickly as possible so that they at least become a little curious. And someone stopped me after my remarks to say, how do you do this with an executive audience if they're kind of tuned out? And it's a real challenge, especially when you start talking about things that are fitted on devices and plants and the like. But for all that, oil and gas is still a very attractive market for the Internet of Things. But why is that? And if we can understand the answer to the why question, it can help us position these ideas and solutions as candidates in the eyes of the customer out there. Henry, I know you're on the sort of the consumer end. You mentioned already data as a barrier, quality of data as a barrier. Why is oil and gas considered attractive besides the fact that it's got a lot of data? What else is out there?
Thank you for that. No, it's just a great market. I think people here are pretty innovative, looking to incorporate like us, AI, ML technology. We grew from Carnegie Mellon University. We use it cutting edge, and there are a lot of customers coming to us in oil and gas space because they're looking to what's next, what is possible after advanced process control, what can we do, today. I think Dr. Satya mentioned this. One thing that we've seen a lot of times is the whole idea of transparency. And transparency of data, transparency, what is happening in the background? There's a lot of companies out there who say AI is a black box. Throw something in, something comes out, and it's all magic. And that's one thing we take very to heart. That's not something. We built platform, we built a human machine interface, HMI, to really showcase what's actually happening on the background. What is the output? What is the biasm? What is the different type of safety boundaries and constraints we have? And that is why having that. We also built a data pipeline tool to do all this because, like I said, there's just so much unstructured data, so much silo data. For us, the first, a lot of our work is taking all that, understanding what is the most prevalent, what is the most important tags, what's the control variables, disturbance variables, what is the ones that we can use to build these models. And, the model creation itself is hard, but the aspect of learning what is the applicability. And one thing that I want to also add is oil and gas space is there's so much that we can apply AI, ML, and other leading technologies to, but one thing is it's not a one-size-fits-all. You shouldn't use AI for everything. I think there's a need for people, everybody else, to say, hey, what's the return on investment? What can this do? What can this do? And ask those questions before you make that investment.
How about you, David? What about your perspectives around the attractiveness of this market? Are there other markets which are vying for the attention of the Internet of Things world out there? I mean, it's a bit of a leading question, but
it's exciting. Where the market is and where it's going to go in the next 4 to 5 years is a complete lake change, right? It's just going to change everything, and the attractiveness of running towards the solutions will be one of your biggest problems, because you should never back engineer a solution to your strategy. Never, right? And the solution provider that you choose should be a consultant, should be your partner. Now we all get that, right? Because they're selling something. But that's how serious this is. Because if you're just buying a product or a solution, right, and you don't have your strategy, and you don't have the right coach, then you're going to find yourself achieving to the limitations of the problems you're going to encounter. And that's very important for us to understand. So, because with every solution, right, there's a disruption. And we all know energy works on scale. And so any disruption in the value chain can cause serious issues, downstream. So this is very important for the aspects of understanding the market. There's an activity that's relatively new. It's been around for 15, 20 years, but right, is information technology asset management. Everything you buy will have a license. Every license has an end date. And you keep buying solutions, you're tossing all these end dates over your shoulder, and your IT director or CIOs don't necessarily want to pay attention to that. And you'll end up having this huge ocean of expiration dates running through your enterprise. And so it's very important that scenario planning should be the first stage of your engagement.
There's actually an app for that, I've learned.
Right.
which I could share with you. A company I was about to interview on my podcast is actually dealing with this precise issue, because the problem is the legal exposure when you are found to be non-compliant against the contracts you've signed up because you didn't read the terms that clearly. There's a question on Slido, which I wanted to read out, which is, what about security concerns? We used to think that air gapping our infrastructure protected our industrial control systems, our PCSs, our DCSs, and the like. How do we connect every, I think that says dog. Is that a, oh yeah, how do we connect every dog and his man to the World Wide Web? What are we willing to get into here? Are there any of us on the panel security?
I wrote an article on that almost 6 years ago on IoT and security for our industry. And since then, it has been a challenging thing. We'll talk about in general in industry perspective, how much training do we actually provide related to cybersecurity? Right? So when it comes to really operational things, we are very good as an industry to provide the training to go out and actually and make people train in those aspects. But as soon as when it comes to emerging technologies, we haven't invested that much. And as a result, education about what are the challenges related to cybersecurity, related to smaller sensors to large scale IoT devices, this has to be really put into perspective, and that is an investment that the industry really needs to do.
Yeah.
When you're looking at security and you're looking at OT, as opposed to when the information hits the airwaves, but all of the devices that you purchase should have a security element embedded in the device, right? Everything. That then complements the cybersecurity that hits the airwaves.
Yeah, it does add a burden of encryption, decryption, and the like, but it may in fact be worth it. Henry, did you want to contribute?
Yeah, no, I think this is very much top of mind. I mean, the whole idea, we also, as a software company, do periodical code reviews. I mean, there's bugs and codes. We always make sure we program, we do these, and we have red hat, white hat penetration testing to see if that happens. Point-to-point encryption. A lot of our customers still has the air gaps, right? So for us, we have deploy on premise behind a firewall air gap when we deploy on site on the premise, because our customers don't want to have that exposure, right? So the element that how do you live in the public cloud, totally air gapped on premise, and then have that chain of secure communications. A lot of times is these secure gateways and ways we built in and make sure we always work with our customers to do periodic reviews. I think that's one that goes back to, as software vendors, you always need to make sure your customers feels comfortable. So we do our own, we do it with our customers, and we do this on a frequent basis. And, the most you can do is more testing and keep on at it.
Yeah, security can be used as a reason not to do something, actually. But I think the upside from the adoption of these technologies is far greater. And so let's turn to that. Where is the prize here from the adoption of these tools? Is it better human enablement? Is it just speed? Like what's the prize? So David, let's start with you from that perspective. When you're advocating these technologies through a more independent lens, what is the prize that you want people to land on here?
Increased revenue, efficiency of operations, lower the carbon footprint, better decisions. All these things are factors that permeate through the value chain, that machine learning, digital visualization, artificial intelligence, smart aspects, smart tubulars, smart drill bits, all the way to the operation of everything, right? These are all value added that the energy industry constantly seeks for, and it's going to enter into a whole new era of this reaching new levels of performance.
So the prize isn't the sensor proper, it is the data you get from the sensor. That's
right.
What I hear you saying. It's all about if you.
But it's based on your strategy. Everything rolls back to that, right? What's your strategy? What is it? And then if you look at how technology adoption occurs, certainly, in complex operations, you have to look for usability before you look for digital transformation of your whole operations. Right? Otherwise, you end up shooting for the moon and you don't quite make it.
And not get there, exactly. Satya, maybe over to you. Are you seeing specific upside characteristics for the adoption of Internet of Things Data we know, but what's beyond that, if anything?
Yeah, so I think some of the things that David mentioned are important, but what we have to look at is, as an oil and gas industry, how much of that we want to really take advantage to be really a big player in the whole energy transition landscape, right? We cannot just focus purely on who we are as oil and gas, but as who we are as oil and gas in the bigger landscape. And that's where the larger portion of that benefit will come by deploying industrial IoT sensors and technologies like that to increase our automation footprint, which will automatically increase your optimization and efficiency. And then as a result, you can actually build some good innovative solutions, especially related to carbon capture and others that are very critical for the industry. And and as a result, what happens is that you also, I think earlier David or our other friend mentioned that about the data quality. The question is, these sensors will actually allow you to create what I call the smart data. And that is what makes the whole value proposition much better than just thinking about a linear framework. And I think that's where the most of the value will come for our industry.
Now let's turn to this question of examples. Can we share some real life stories of companies' use that can highlight some of the impact that they've experienced? Henry, I know in your case, since your software business is using and consuming the data, can you share any specific use cases? You don't have to name names, but I was just going to say, here's the prize, guys, that we can go after.
Right. So, a little bit, I think it's a good segue from the previous question is, I think to David's point, the strategy scenario really drives that. Nobody wakes up in the day and be like, hey, I'm going to try new technology. There needs to be a rationale, right? You want to be stronger, faster, better, so forth. And a lot of that is looking into, and as a software vendor, we have to always, benchmark, prove what have we done better. And one thing is we always, want like 8 to 7% of yield and energy savings is one of the key metrics we go with the customers. So for us, we work with downstream fractionation, and we're looking to using the same amount of input, how much output can you squeeze out? What is the optimization principle this time? When you're doing these optimizer, when you're looking at inferences, when you're building these models, are you doing predictions, prescriptions? And for us, we do final closed loop automations, autonomous operations. What is the output? And we benchmark this against customers with APCs, advanced process control, benchmark this against ones who don't. Are we 5%, are we 8% better than ones with APCs and ones without? And that's something we pretty consistently have to showcase to our customers. We have to say, hey, this is what you guys had before, this is what you guys have done, this is your energy saving, this is how much tons of carbon CO2, NOx you've saved. And that's what we've done papers and studies on for our point of view to showcase that.
David, how about you? Can you share some examples or use cases of companies that have done some really interesting things through their Internet of Things strategies?
Thank you. Yes, I can. Especially some of them that I've personally worked on. One was a major organization. Trying to make sure I don't give names, right?
Yeah, you have to be very careful here on.
But one of the biggest challenges that they had was, how did they shorten the time to decision to drill based on the discovery of the idea that I want to drill in this reserve? And what we were able to do was constrict that time to decision by roughly 4 to 6 months, which allowed them to be able to put product in market on the trading floor, right? And book that revenue that could make to market, as well as reduce the cost of expenses of shortening the time to market or the time to drill by 4 to 6 months. And the solution was really simple. It's Microsoft SharePoint. But what we did is we used robotic process automation, assessments and approaches. And the challenge for us was getting the whole drill team, there's like 14 job titles in that group, and getting them lined up in a value chain where everybody understood what everybody else was supposed to be doing. And we found cinch points in the value chain where there was convergence of repetitive activity and the loss of information thereof. And so we were able to gather all this information, provide automatic updates to the people in case they didn't do it. And then when the various decision makers on the drill team in the executive office, right, like the chief financial officer, who may not have the approval to drill, but they certainly have the approval to not drill. And we were able to deliver the right information to the right decision makers at the times that they needed the information to make the decision possible. And we were able to automate that process. And that allowed us to move to market 4 to 6 months faster than the previous setup.
Dr. Satchem, how about you? Any real life use cases that you could share of Internet of Things deployment that delivered real value?
Yeah, so couple of things that we can learn from other industries, especially in agriculture. If you look at it, how they are actually using in like production of or sorting of say almonds and other things. It's a very fascinating area. The data or the image analysis activity that needs to take place is at almost real time from millions and millions of these almonds or fruit like that is going through the belt, and which is similar to what we want to do in a cutting analysis in the drilling space, and that could be really taken advantage. And the way they do it is by deploying multiple IoT sensors along the belt, and as a result we leverage the maybe Henry's artificial intelligence algorithms to actually make some sense out of it in a real time, so decision making is fast. The second area is really integrated healthcare. If you want to see how they have put, how they make this IoT to IoT communication easy in terms of really looking at a holistic diagnosis of various things in the hospitals. And of course, these are like slightly ahead of the game, but in a small scale. But I think there are a lot of things that we can learn from our industry.
Yeah, other industries are actually further ahead. Oil and gas, because of the nature of the industry, we tend to be a bit slower to adopt than other sectors, and so there is insight to be gained from outside. I don't know, Henry, are you working outside of oil and gas, and are there some examples that you've seen?
We are. I mean, we did kind of more like proof of concepts in healthcare and financial services. So, you know, there's some elements of, yes, there are financial services are doing some interesting things with natural language processing and kind of generating these, you know, 10Ks and summarizing this. And we also work with RPA or robotic process automation customers, partners as well. So there are, but yes, industrial, I mean, oil and gas does have some lag time, but there are other aspects where they're doing some very, very interesting things are not seen in other places, because I think there was a question, what's our ROI, right? I mean, because it's a huge business. You know, a lot of the top companies, the largest companies in the world are oil and gas companies, right? So even a small, minute 5% increase can have ramifications across the board, billions of dollars in savings or production. So, you know, our focus industrial has mostly been in the closed loop, and that's where ROIs is. We've done, you know, we give them predictions, we give them kind of analytics aspect, and we tell them, hey, this is what you do to give them that actionable insights. But end of the day, what's really driving ROI is once we actually turn it on and we're driving these, you know, massive operations, you know, then we're actually seeing that 5-10% increase in yield, and that's translates down to, I would say, cost savings and revenue, but, you know, in that same vein of thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being able to capture unrealized revenue is very important, and a lot of people overlook that. We do. We're currently working with a retail shopper loyalty program company, and they're really leading the way in this, and it's so emerging, right? That which is, by the way, a challenge for many of you in when you choose in emerging markets. You got to really evaluate your provider because there's very little precedence that you have to manage for it. That's why you have to make sure that you're not just buying a solution. You know, you're buying the integrity and the ethics of the people you're working with. That's very important. But in the retail, this company can actually predict within $15 anytime shoppers go into a grocery store, if they're a loyalty shopper. Now that may upset many of you, because it's behavioral analytics, but it's where it's going.
I'm waiting for the disloyal program to come out because that's my model. We've got some great questions flowing through Slido here. Let's go to the top one, which relates to cloud adoption in terms of IoT. What are the caveats of cloud adoption? Aren't we making the same mistake by siloing our data, but this time with outside vendors like AWS and Azure? And will we be constrained by our ability to move the data between cloud companies? I don't personally, I don't know the exact answer to this, but I do know that if I try to download a movie, it takes a while. I'm not sure what happens when you start moving petabytes around. It's going to take it'll be a while of work. I don't know if anyone in the panel has had any experience or any exposure to this topic.
I think microclouds are very important. Those like clouds at the reserve, and then have your machine learning working off of that microcloud, and then have that link back up to the master cloud. We're seeing that there's some unique opportunities working with that kind of activity for speed of decision.
So that way it's not an all or nothing thing on AWS or Azure. You can pick the cloud for the context that you're after.
Right, and from our point of view, that's exactly one reason we exist is we're kind of cloud or vendor agnostic, and we work with Microsoft, Azure, and AWS. We haven't done as much Google ones, but I'm sure GPT as well. Amazon has their cloud; they have their Outpost and everything. There is going to be somewhat of vendor lock once you work with AWS and Microsoft. There is going to be typically your shop for them. I mean, they have all the tools available. I think you just have to be aware. And I know when you're talking about retail, a lot of our customers don't like working with AWS because they compete against Amazon, right? So there's this funny things where back in VMware we worked with a lot of those retailers who don't want to work with AWS. And I think it's important to know if you are, that's where you're going to kind of more or less work with them very exclusively. They're like us, we have a kind of a VMware model for us when we point of view Petrum, is we want to be that kind of honest broker. We work with AWS, Azure, whatever your provider you can. We are built off of Kubernetes containers that we can deploy that way.
The speed of decision at the point of engagement is absolutely critical for on-site activity. And if people are getting involved in wearable technology, that's essential to have those connected to machine learning capabilities in the field.
Right at the field, yeah. Let's try another question here. This one could work for any number of conferences, actually. What tool have you found that has generated the biggest ROI? I'm going to go with oil field tool, say. Let's work with that one. For our panel, have you seen any specific tools out there that have generated the biggest ROI?
I'm not I'm a vendor, so I'm not going to answer this too much, but I'm sure you've seen a lot of good tools out there.
Mixed reality is showing some great promise right now. We're working with an upstream E&P company in learning management of repairs and fixes that can reduce the downtime by actually when a person puts on the goggles, right, and they can see a diagram that gives them explanations of how to repair, and that's updated. And that is probably one of the biggest emerging tools. It's been explored by Exxon and others over the past couple of years, but it's still growing. It's still emerging.
I'm going to skip down to the bottom one because it's provocative. After so many years of working in IoT, it's problematic. We still have to talk about farmers for case studies, agriculture. Can the panel share oil gas specific case studies of value? I'll share one. Imagine if you're doing a multi-stage fracking job, and your ability to learn from one frack stage to the next is constrained because the amount of data that you're collecting coming out of your frack is often coming at such a volume and too quickly for it to inform the next frack just down the line. And so what the engineers typically do is figure out what they want to do for the frack at that moment at the start, and then they repeat the same frack design 10 times in a row. Ching, 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 ching. No learning curve. So what if you could use the data from the frac that you've just completed, process it really quickly, and then use that to then frame up the next frac? That's being done today. And that's an oil and gas specific one, which sharpens up the frac job. But it doesn't work. Again, back to my little model of signature ways of working. It combines the Internet of Things plus the data engine to Henry's business model. You got to have the smart engine up there that can actually process the data.
There are some use cases in the production space as well. So
Yeah.
they're pretty standard, not scaled fully, but at least they are being deployed and they are being used in various parts of the world. So with some of our partners, so that there are some very specific use cases. One can go in details later.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about this one. It's interesting. That's an interesting leading question, agriculture. I mean, in oil and gas space, I see a lot of use cases. I mean, right now with soft sensors and lab data, right? So one thing AI doesn't do as well is AI ML is, not as frequent data. And that's one thing we have to build around and figure out. This is maybe hourly lab data, soft sensor. We have to build these kind of models that take in these longer time frame before data comes. We see that when we work with our customers. Another ones is broken sensors. In IoT space, when broken sensors happen or some sensors don't give the right data, we have to have these outliers and smoothing of our models. I mean, that goes back to the continuous learning aspect of AI ML. So, we definitely see a lot of this beyond agriculture in production.
All right, we only have about 2.5 minutes to go, and when you see the orange shirt hovering at the side, that's our sign. So we're going to move to just to a quick couple of final questions here, and I'll take one from the Slido, which relates to edge devices. Where did that one go? Yeah, here we are. Following the cloud question, do edge solutions provide an opportunity to lessen dependence on the cloud, which means processing more right at the site on-prem and in real time? I've seen personally lots of examples of edge devices in oil and gas. Ambient Solutions would be a great example that does that. What about the panel? Have you guys seen similar edge devices that lessen your reliance?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we deploy on the edge. I mean, one thing about AI/ML is we do most of our training in a central location, either through public cloud or a private data center, because that's where a lot of the data and the processing happens. But once the model's trained, the inferences can be, we built our containers to deploy on the edge, and that's a pretty big model. I know there are a lot of customers out there who don't want to purely on the public cloud.
Public cloud, yeah, exactly. David, have you seen edge devices that are used as a way to compensate for cloud limitations?
I think it all works together. Micro clouds, edge computing. You can't really have a powerful edge computing capability without a micro cloud in some way grinding through all the data and delivering the information. But once again, right back, one of the questions we had from another major E&P company was that they get so much data, they don't know what to do with it. And their challenge is, can they ask the right questions?
Yeah.
And but you need the crunching capability that a device can't really give you.
I mean, we've got just a few seconds left. Henry, any last-minute thoughts on the horizon for IoT? What do you see out there?
Yeah, from our point of view, I think the future's bright. I mean, IoT is, the core competence of getting the data, and then the AI ML. I see this becoming more and more prevalent. So, yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Satya, maybe your final word to you. What do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the proper and quick implementation of IoTs will lead to a better HSE, better production, cost-effective solutions, and actually help us in the actual carbon reduction that we keep talking about. Brilliant.
All right, time's up. The clock goes into, it goes beyond seconds, it gets into microseconds, so it's just yelling at us. That brings to an end of what I think has been a very interesting discussion. I'm sure you've taken some great value from this, and if you don't mind, let's thank our panelists in the customary Houston fashion.
Thank you.
Panelists, thank you very much. That was awesome. Geoffrey, Henry, Satyam, and David, thank you very